Now that the dust is settling on the transfer portal, where do the Miami Hurricanes stand with their top recruiting targets in the class of 2025?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and also co-host of Locked On ACC. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Going to be chatting with the recruiting overlord, Brian Smith, in just a second. He's brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And on this episode, we're going to talk about organic recruiting versus transfer portal. Is Miami doing too much of the latter? How do you find the perfect balance? I want to talk about, with Brian Smith's unbiased opinion, who's got the better roster between Miami and Florida? Because they're going to go head-to-head August 31st. I want Miami's fans to know what to expect. But yes, we're going to be talking about some of the most important recruiting targets for the Miami Hurricanes in this cycle. The Overlord is with us. Brian Smith, do you think Miami is going to be, hopefully, by the time the dust settles, trending for another top 5 type recruiting class?
I think they probably will. They're doing the right things, and they're taking care of most of the business at home that they can. A lot of the kids obviously make decisions later. That's typical South Florida, but they're in position to get a lot of the best players down south, and they're now dipping into California, Texas, New Jersey, everywhere to get official visits from top kids out of those states as well. The next month or so, we'll find out, but Miami's isn't good a position as any school in the country.
Let's talk about a couple of the 5-star players that Miami is after. Zayden Walker, top-ranked linebacker in the class. He's a 5-star linebacker out of Schley County, Georgia. He is going to be announcing on July 5th, and his finalists are Georgia, Miami, Penn State, and South Carolina. How are things trending at this moment with Zayden Walker? I don't think Miami's in the lead. What will they have to do to get there before July 5th?
They got to get him on campus again. They might have an unofficial coming up, and they also have unofficial set with him. I mean, that's all they can do. He's been to campus before. At some point, that's all you can do. But Georgia is the prohibitive favorite. It's a rural Georgia school. That's typical. But Miami's won some of those battles recently with players, Chicago, Georgia, wherever, Alabama. Miami gets a couple of these kind of kids every year, and you don't expect it. I'm not predicting them not to get a kid. Mario and his staff do a great job, and especially front 7 guys like Nicholson's a really good recruiter. So even if they don't get him in round 1, if you will, it's not like Miami's going to stop recruiting him either.
Right. Talk to me a little bit about him as a player. What does Zayden Walker bring to the table?
There's not much he doesn't do. He's the kind of kid at the high school level, you could just play him at Wildcat quarterback and win a game.
Wow.
220 pounds, can really run, change direction, very twitchy, got long arms. He's the kid that is designed to play on the edge in college football, and he can go out in coverage too, but he'll track down a play from the backside on an RPO. He'll run down a screen from the backside. The speed that he has is more like a 190-pound guy, and especially that first step explosion. And he's been a guy that's on the radar for numerous schools for a few years. Like he's one of the kids we knew that was going to be really, really good. And he just continues to get better. Maybe the best thing about him is when he hits go, it just continues through the whistle. He's not a guy that gives up. So coaches love that stuff.
Brian, I want to talk here about another 5-star recruit that Miami is a finalist for. Maybe you can explain to me how the recruiting process is going for Jaime Ffrench, the 5-star wide receiver out of Mandarin High School in Jacksonville, because Ffrench, like he's gotten not too long ago crystal ball predictions to land at Ohio State. Yet Ohio State is not a named finalist now for him. He's listed a top 3, which are the Texas Longhorns, LSU Tigers, and the Miami Hurricanes. So a team he was predicted to go to, OSU, is not in the top 3. A lot of people think the Longhorns are trending out in front right now, but it seems like things can change pretty quickly with Jaime Ffrench.
That's been his recruitment for the last year. He really blew up early in his recruitment, but then this past summer at Future 50, he was the MVP, and then everybody went at Texas, etc. I think Jamie's a little overwhelmed. He's a fun guy to be around and whatnot, but I think he's overwhelmed because now it's just like every time he looks at his phone, he's got a head coach trying to contact him. So he might be the best receiver in the country, and he's earned the praise. Like when he's on the field, he dominates. He backs it up. He plays really hard. He's fast. He's twitchy. He makes incredible catches, all the above. But at the same time, if you're a fool enough to bet on where he's going to go to school, that's on you, not on me. I've known him since 8th grade, and I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. His list changes constantly.
Yeah.
Schools that kind of stay in the mix, Miami being one, but like his list changes constantly.
Have you heard anything recently from Dallas Wilson from Tampa Bay Tech? This is another 5-star wide receiver who's been committed to Oregon for a long time, but this is someone Miami's had Dallas Wilson on campus a lot. This is another 5-star receiver that they seem to be going after pretty hard.
He plays at Tech in Tampa. He's a kid I've known for quite a while. He's dominant too. Besides Jaime, he was the next best receiver at the Future 50 last summer. Big-bodied kid that can really change direction, 6'3", about 200 pounds. Oregon is the school he grew up rooting for. It's kind of random for a Tampa kid, but he committed. I know. Look, I don't know what it is. A lot of Florida kids like Oregon. I don't. Whatever. That's their business. But I always thought that he would end up staying down south, one of the SEC schools, or at least somebody in Florida. But I've heard Oregon's in pretty good shape for him. Miami might be the best bet to flip him, but it's not going to be easy. He just really likes Oregon.
Well, I want to talk when we come back about the Miami Hurricanes roster, the Florida Gators roster, because Brian, late last week, Brandon Olson and I hosted Locked On Gators. We had a crossover. I think he said something about how the Gators are going to win by 90, and he's not worried about Miami. I don't know. I know Miami's got a lot of new faces, but I think Miami's roster can keep it within 90, Brian. We want to talk about that when we come back. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes.
90.
When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or you're looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401ks and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Thank you so much for making this recruiting overlord episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Brian Smith is with us. Brian, by the way, is not only the recruiting expert of Locked On, he's also my colleague at allhurricanes.com, doing great work there. So, Brian, as we'll circle back to recruiting, but as we inch closer to August 31st at the Swamp, the Gator fans, easy W for them, they say. what say you, Brian? You look at these rosters, right? And yeah, Miami does have a lot of portal players, but I'm not too worried about Cam Ward. I think he's going to be good in that game. How do you compare the two rosters and who has the edge?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, they're both big teams. Like Florida up front defensively is massive. They run a 3-down line and stand up outside linebacker rushing off the edge. They call it a jack. Cam Jackson's like 350 pounds or something like that, a nose. So it'll be a challenge for Miami's offensive line, but I still think Miami's O-line will win the battle. And on the other side, especially after what I saw Florida State do to Florida towards the end of last year, I just don't have any faith in their offensive line playing well together. They got a pretty good quarterback. I mean, he was, especially towards the end of the year, I think that you should be, as a Florida fan, thinking, okay, Mertz is going to be serviceable against anybody. And he's pretty accurate. But I just don't think they'll be able to run the ball that well. So I think the line on both sides favors the Hurricanes, especially in an early game when chemistry on offenses aren't that great. Who runs the ball probably wins the game, and I think Miami's offense will run the ball better. I like Miami.
Yeah, it's why, like, adding Damian Martinez to me, like, looking at that first game, like, that makes a huge difference in my eyes, especially since, nobody's sure if Mark Fletcher is going to be ready for that opening game. So, if he isn't ready, had Miami not added Martinez, you'd be looking at some talented running backs, but, guys who are 185 or smaller, right? You add Martinez, who's a 237-pound bulldozer. I think, that's going to, I'm hoping for a repeat Ray Davis performance from what the Kentucky back did to Florida last year.
Oh, my gosh. I watched a little of that game. That was like the Red Sea parted and Moses was walking through. I mean, it was just ridiculous. I mean, holy cow. He ran for like 250 yards or something like that. I can't remember. It was insane.
Still running.
Yeah, look, Florida's better than what they probably showed on their record last year, but they're just so inept in dumb ways, like 2 players on the field with the same number on special teams, stuff like that. They're just so bad from a coaching perspective, and they get in their own way. And then they've got a ton of guys in their secondary that are really highly recruited. Miami offered Florida State, etc., and they're inept. They just flat have a coaching problem. The roster probably isn't that far from Miami's, to be really honest. They still recruit well. They just aren't maximized. There's no politically correct way to say it. I will be shocked if Billy Napier is there after this year. I just don't think he's that good a coach. And I think the Miami game will be the beginning of his downfall in year 3.
How many points, though, for Florida is being at the Swamp worth? Because that is something that a lot of people bring up. It's a crazy environment, right?
It is. I've been to a game there. It's not friendly. I mean, that's a 5-point advantage, give or take. Wow. It's a top 5 environment in college football, no question. But their fan base doesn't have any faith in them either. Now, they hate Miami and vice versa, and it'll be loud and stuff. But if you come out and play well in the first quarter, big if, that crowd will get really silent because they're used to, quite honestly, failing. Their fan base is really on edge. There's a lot of complaining and gnashing of teeth, and I understand because Florida should never be bad 2-3 years in a row. I mean, it's not that hard to win at Florida. It's really not.
Right.
But their fan base is pretty irritated. If Miami gets up early, that could be boo birds. Like I really think like if Miami got up 21-10 at halftime or something like that, it could get ugly. Now, if Florida does well in the first part of the game, they will go all in because they're just dying for something good to happen because they're a very loyal fan base and at least showing up. I mean, they sell out that place for big games. It'd be crazy. Got to win the first quarter if you're the Miami Hurricanes.
You brought up line of scrimmage play. Let's circle back to recruiting with that. A player who's been committed to Florida State, and I think Miami and Florida could factor into his recruitment, is 5-star interior offensive lineman Solomon Thomas. He's out of Raines High School in Jacksonville. He's been committed to Florida State. There's been a lot of chatter about Miami trying to flip him. And then, Brian, there's been recent chatter about Florida making a lot of progress in flipping this player from Florida State. What's going on with Solomon Thomas?
Florida might be the biggest threat to Florida State if you just go by visits. Now, it's close.
Yeah.
From where he lives, it's not that hard to get to Gainesville from Jacksonville. However, LSU's had him on campus. Miami's had him on campus. This is a young man that could go to a lot of schools. The last time I spoke with him a couple months ago, he made it pretty clear that he was going to kind of take his time with it now. I think he kind of rushed into his Florida State commitment, but he does like Florida State a lot. but I wouldn't be surprised if he signed with any of those programs. I don't think there's a true leader among the group. That's just my opinion. Good kid, but he probably rushed into his decision a little bit.
Now, on the flip side of the line of scrimmage, this is a player I know Jason Taylor and Mario Cristobal have both visited in your neck of the woods at Enterprise High School in Alabama. Where's Miami right now with Zion Grady, who's a 4-star edge rusher?
They've actually moved up a little bit, reading the tea leaves. And like I'd interviewed him after an Auburn visit, and he likes all the schools locally and all that. But Alabama kind of dropped the ball on him. That gave Auburn a shot. Yeah, I don't know. He was committed there, and the new staff didn't go after him. That's belligerent, but that's another story for another day. Georgia wants a kid. He's committed to your school. You should recruit him. Okay, that's especially a front seven guy like Zion. I also think that Miami, they did a good job on his visit, has at least solidified itself in the top 3 or 4 schools. Now it's going to come down to the OV. They got a chance to steal one. They got a couple really good players out of Alabama last year. They're already moving up the depth chart. Why not Zion Grady? This is a top 100 player, pretty much consensus by everybody, and he can play edge or outside linebacker. He fits the profile for what Cristobal and his staff has wanted, and that's length.
Yeah.
And great kid, too. Great kid. So, I mean, Miami's prioritized him from day one in like January when they kind of flipped the script to the 25 class, and he knows it. Don't be shocked if he ends up at Miami because Alabama was the easy choice for him. I don't think he wants to go to Auburn, although he likes it. So it's open for him to leave the state. It's a really bizarre recruitment. I'm still shocked that Alabama didn't take the low-hanging fruit there, but
yeah,
that's why I'm not as high on Kalen DeBoer as some other people. You cannot fail at recruiting and being in the SEC, in the trenches, and be successful at the level Alabama expects to be. He was committed there again, and they didn't go after. I don't understand that. And it didn't soon after he decommitted.
That is quite shocking. A player you wrote about at allhurricanes.com that Jason Taylor went out to Denton, Texas, to Geyer High School to visit defensive tackle Xavier Okpanu. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope I am. 6'3", 290-pounder. What's the deal there, Brian?
I know that program, and it's like football is life, kind of like breathing. That's Geyer High School. Their weight room is no different than the Dallas Cowboys, basically. It's insane. And everything they do is 100 mile an hour. I'd seen this kid before when he was an underclassman, 240, 250 then, but now he's a lot bigger. This is a young man that is a developmental player that is a bull in a china shop. Has a little bit of technique, but he's got a ways to go, and they play a 3-man line, a lot of 2-gap stuff. Not many high schools can do that, but they got enough size and enough players to get away with it at Geyer.
Yeah.
When he runs into somebody, you better anchor. He's not a speed guy. He's going to try to run through you. He's a power player. I think he can be a nose guard at the college level, not necessarily somebody that's going to make a ton of tackles, but take up a double team and stuff the run. Miami, we've talked about this almost every time we've been on together on this show. Miami needs more size at D-tackle out of the high school ranks. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They get the guys they got last year and they stick, and they get another class like this one they're building on. They could possibly get to that point where they don't have to rely on the portal moving forward. This is one of those guys. It's a developmental player, but you can't teach 6'3", 290. So I don't think he's an impact guy, but this is an old school Miami power player that used to get in the 80s and 90s that was really impactful for helping the linebackers stay free and get to the football.
He spoke to our colleague Patrick Loney at allhurricanes.com on Jason Taylor visiting. He said, I was surprised he visited me, to be honest. We talked for about 40 minutes. He was completely honest with me, saying they haven't had much luck getting recruits to come to Miami from Texas. He says, honestly, it doesn't matter to me if I stay in state or not. So that's what he told our colleague Patrick Loney at allhurricanes.com. I want to talk defensive backfield when we come back. Chris Ewald, Ben Hanks Jr., where does Miami stand with a couple of South Florida cornerbacks? Brian Smith, the recruiting overlord, is with us. You know what you want to do. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And I already know you're keeping it locked to FanDuel. We're winning money. We're having so much fun. Playoff season is here, guys. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL. FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. We won big on the Florida Panthers, 6-1. That was too easy in game 2, that bounce back game against the Boston Bruins. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet at FanDuel. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Shout out to the everydayers. If you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, join our Locked On Canes Insiders chat. I include the link in the show description below. When you become a Locked On Canes Insider, you get text messages directly from my phone to yours and vice versa, one-on-one questions and answers, breaking news, recruiting and transfer portal scoops. It's all there at Locked On Canes Insiders, and then you can try it for 2 weeks free. If you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of added value on there on Locked On Canes Insiders. Brian Smith is with us. So, Brian, a couple players we haven't talked about a whole lot recently. I think it's because the transfer portal has had us just all distracted away from high school recruiting a little bit. Where does Miami stand with 4-star local cornerbacks like Chris Ewald Jr. from Chaminade and Ben Hanks Jr. from Booker T, who happens to be a Florida Gator legacy, but there hasn't been a whole lot of Gator traction for him?
Hanks is an interesting situation. Booker T is a program that obviously Miami has an in with because it's right down the street from Coral Gables. But I don't know where he's going to go. You're right about Florida. I don't think it's UF. I'd heard that early on, but I thought it would be Miami or Florida State. And I haven't heard anything on either one of those schools lately. Maybe he's going to wait it out a little while when maybe he wants to take some more visits. But there's nothing new that says a certain school has jumped in the mix. I'll still pick Miami or Florida State until the end. I mean, they both recruit the Miami Public League very well.
Yeah.
But nothing special about a new school, which for a lot of the other Florida kids we've talked about, there's an out-of-state school that's an influencing possibility. I don't think there's as much with him. As for the situation with Ewald, Auburn is the wild card. He, for whatever reason, has a connection there. He's been going there for a long, long time. He said like when he was 11 years old, the first time he visited, I don't know, maybe somebody from his family just took him up, got kind of random for a camp. But that's a big-time prospect, man. That's of all the kids in South Florida, because of Miami's need at corner, one could argue Chris is the most important recruit. They need pure cover corners because that's what made Miami great back in their heyday. I'm not sure they're where they want to be yet at that point. And that's, to me, Miami's biggest question mark this season is DB. Do they have a takeaway player at corner, at safety, et cetera? And they lost a lot of talent. So this is the way you get it. You go right to your backyard. South Florida's always got big-time corners and safety. So Auburn's the school I'd watch, but Miami is still my pick until otherwise noted.
A couple of other local players, defensive linemen. What about the Miami Central duo, Floyd Boucard and Randy Adirika? Are you hearing anything Miami with them lately?
Miami Penn State for Randy is the word. I think at the end of the day, I mean, I've talked to him about Florida State was a school that was in on him pretty early. He'd told me that last fall, maybe the Noles, but I'm going to go Miami. As for Boucard, his recruitment's a little bit wilder. He's a kid, number one, that was from Canada. Number two, he moved to the Mobile area, then moved to Miami Central. So he's not a pure local kid. And his visit list is random. Louisville, Miami, Oklahoma, and Oregon.
Wow.
I mean, that's just really random. So I have no idea where he's going to go. I do know that he was tremendous at the Under Armour camp in South Florida. He was really, really good. I'd be surprised if he's not a kid that Miami just makes a super, super focus on until he makes his decision and signs. Can't teach 300 pounds, man. That's a big human being, and he can really move. He's a pretty good pass rusher for his size. This is what the doctor ordered. And I know he's a transplant, but he's now in your backyard. Miami needs to sign Big Floyd.
Recruiting versus transfer portal, Brian, it seems like at least numbers-wise right now, programs like Miami and Florida State are doing very well at both. I was reading an article that they're actually the only schools in the ACC that in 2024 have both top 12 in the portal and top 12 in recruiting, which is interesting. But then you look at like a program like Georgia relies, a lot more on organic recruiting than they do transfer portal additions, they've also had a lot more time to build up a very, very deep roster. Clemson doesn't use the portal at all. Is there like a formula in your mind for what's like a good mix of selective portal recruiting to go along with organic recruiting?
Well, there's a couple of consternations here. Number one, you brought up a really good point. One can make a strong argument that Georgia's the best job in the country because the state's massive and it's the only really good program in that state with a lot of talent. They don't have to use the portal. I mean, they just, every now and then a kid gets hurt, they'll take a receiver or something, but they recruit nationally, get elite kids and just develop them. So it's kind of hard to compare apples to oranges. Miami, when Mario got there, we heard him say unsolicited, hey, the roster is not what we thought it was going to be. He brought that up multiple times with you there, me there, etc. Like, he didn't make any bones about it. So in today's world, how patient would you say Miami fans are, Donno? What would you say? Scale 1 to 10.
Oh, if they're less patient than my 6-year-old when he wants candy. Like, there's no patience.
That's the problem he's in. Look, you're probably not going to win national titles relying on the portal as much as Miami is,
right,
but they got to get started. Like they were at a negative. Like comparing the roster when he took over to Georgia is comical. So I think starting in 26, the class, they'll finish this one, the next, they need to be able to start dwindling on how much they rely on the portal because they have their system in place now. But like D tackle was really thin. They're still not quite where they need to be at DB, et cetera. They had to do those things. Like offensive line might have been their worst spot when they first got there. And of course, Cristobal and his good buddy Alex Mirabal take that very seriously. But now they've recruited that well enough. I don't think they're going to take many portal kids unless it's the center. That's a really critical spot. I think Miami's finally to where we can talk about it realistically. I'll be concerned with Miami on the portal next year. If they're still taking 15 plus kids, that means things aren't going well. But right now, I think they're trending well enough with high school recruits. They just won't have to. And plus, in 25, like Ruben will be a junior, Big Maui Noah, et cetera. They should be a really good roster, be a top 12 team pretty easily. But this year they had to take more kids. It is what it is. If it didn't work out, it didn't work out because they weren't going to have enough talent anyway. They had to do it.
Well, great stuff here as always from Brian Smith. You want to follow him on X at FBScout_Florida. Make sure you check out his work at allhurricanes.com. Brian is always grinding there. You can follow us on X at Locked On Canes. We will follow you back, and we'll talk to everybody again next time. Big Friday coming up tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.